The Gaza war has come to a pause. Final chapter of a generation-defining war is now taking shape. In a high-stakes peace mission, U.S. President Donald Trump met with Israeli leaders seeking to seal a lasting agreement. The visit is being seen as a defining moment of what many are calling the decisive end game in Gaza. Here's a report on this.
After weeks of unyielding and brutal warfare, a moment arrived that many had feared might never dawn. 20 hostages held captive deep inside war-battered confines of Gaza walked free under the glare of cameras and the watchful eyes of negotiators. This breakthrough comes as US President Donald Trump is in West Asia for what's being described as a decisive peace mission. This is his first visit to Israel in 8 years and his first since returning to the White House earlier this year. In Tel Aviv, Trump finally declared the Gaza war is over.
For so many families across this land, it has been years since you've known a single day of true peace. But now at last, not only for Israelis, but also for Palestinians and for many others, the long and painful nightmare is finally over.
Upon his arrival, thousands of supporters erupted in applause, waving hats emblazoned with the words, "Peace President." Trump met with families of the freed hostages, while crowds gathered at the Knesset's visitor gallery proudly wore white caps declaring Trump the Peace President. Inside the Knesset, Trump delivered a stirring address declaring this is not only the end of a war, this is the end of an age of terror and death.
It's the start of a grand concord and lasting harmony for Israel and all the nations of what will soon be a truly magnificent region. I believe that so strongly. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East.
His speech received frequent applause and standing ovations, with many Israeli lawmakers expressing gratitude and praising his role. However, he was heckled by Knesset members Ofer Kasif and Ayman Odeh, which led to a brief disruption. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lauded Trump's contribution as miraculous and unprecedented.
Donald Trump is the greatest friend that the state of Israel has ever had in the White House.
Praising Trump, the Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid said Trump deserved the Nobel Peace Prize.
The fact that you were not awarded the Nobel Peace Prize is a grave mistake by the committee. But they will have no choice, Mr. President. They will have to award it to you next year.
But on the ground, Gaza faces a long, daunting road to recovery. The scars of war are everywhere, with cities reduced to rubble and families displaced.
When we heard there was a truce, we couldn't wait to see our house. We found it reduced to rubble. There is no life at all. When I saw the house, I broke down and started crying. I didn't know what to say.
US troops, about 200 in number, have been deployed to southern Israel's Hatzor air base to assist in overseeing the ceasefire agreement and to coordinate the safe and organized distribution of aid. These troops are not entering Gaza but are part of a multinational task force, including personnel from Egypt, Qatar, Turkey and the UAE, working under the US Central Command. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, joining me live on the broadcast is Dr. Elizabeth Kendall, West Asia analyst and the head of Girton College at Cambridge University. Thank you so much for joining us on WION World is One. As we know right now, US President Donald Trump is headed to Egypt for the Gaza Peace Summit. We've already seen the return of all hostages on Israeli soil, as well as the exchange of prisoners. What is your take on the situation, and what are you expecting from this meeting in Egypt?
First of all, I think we need to acknowledge that this is a game-changing moment in the war. But at the same time, we need to be quite careful about setting our expectations too high for what's ahead. It was so important to get the Israeli hostages out and the Palestinian detainees released, and to get everyone together to try to point them in the same direction, which is peace. But this is the easy bit so far. What's to come is going to be really, really challenging. I think that we are a long way still from Trump's notion of eternal peace, and that we should be seeing this perhaps more as the beginning of the beginning and not the beginning of the end, as he would like. There are many obstacles still in the way, which I'm happy to elaborate on.
Dr. Kendall, you're so right. This is truly the beginning of the beginning, and this is something that we've been trying to have our discussions. We've been having discussions on this all through the course of the day, that even though this is a big historic moment in this war that we've finally seen the return of all hostages, all living hostages back to Israel, but really what remains to be seen is whether or not the questions that were left unanswered, or the points that were left so vague in Trump's 20-point peace plan, the question of legitimacy, insurability, the question of inclusivity, whether or not those can be adequately dealt with in this peace summit.
A couple of the biggest issues that will immediately face those in Egypt are the notion of sequencing. It's going to be really hard to avoid a kind of catch-22 situation where Israel won't pull out further from Gaza until Hamas is completely disarmed, and Hamas won't disarm until Israel pulls out and until its own state is on the way. Don't forget, Israel still holds on to just over 50% of Gaza. That's not a situation in which Hamas will be happy to disarm. And the second huge challenge is, of course, the question of guarantees. Hamas has essentially given up its leverage now. If the hostages are out, what leverage does it have? And the fear is that Israel will simply go back in and finish the job. It was Israel that broke the ceasefire in March when there was previously one. What's to stop that from happening again? The hope is that those who are around the negotiating table in Egypt, Trump, the Turks, the Saudis, etc., will be able to give the guarantees that make Hamas comfortable with some of the other elements of the plan, and likewise the Israelis.
Dr. Elizabeth, I'm deeply sorry for that interruption. We were just facing a technical glitch here. Thank you so much for staying on with us. I'm extremely sorry for that. Let me just quickly come back to what we were discussing. Of course, finish the job. That's something we've heard Netanyahu say again and again. And I believe that's where the question of insurability and legitimacy would come in as well. As you mentioned, now that the hostages are free, there is no leverage for Hamas, and their option only right now appears to be that they do need to disarm. Perhaps, do you think this is where the Palestinian Authority can come in, and do you think they can play a more effective role this time around, and that can be brokered? Do you think that can happen?
Well, I think that's an interesting suggestion. Of course, Netanyahu and his administration, his immediate coalition partners, have said that they would not welcome. They would not consent to the involvement of the Palestinian Authority. And that does beg the question, who are the Palestinian technocrats who would come in and help to broker a future for this region? Because if you can't have the Palestinian Authority, obviously you can't have Hamas. And if some of the capable Palestinians are still in imprisonment in Israel, people like Marwan Barghouti, then whom can you get? I'm sure that there are many more Palestinians, but they will need to be trained up, they will need to have experience, and this is a big question. So further down the line, I think there are questions such as governance. I don't think that a board of peace with neo-colonial overtones that's governed by America with help from people like British Prime Minister Tony Blair is going to be any kind of long-term solution, or indeed short-term solution. And I think the issue of Palestinian statehood has so far been fudged. It's not really included in the 20-point plan. And the 20-point plan talks about a pathway to Palestinian self-determination, but a lot will be in what that pathway is and how self-determination is defined.
Right, Dr. Elizabeth, and just before I let you go, if I could quickly get your opinion on this as well. Will things change on the ground? Because we were also speaking to a former IDF soldier earlier who was rather skeptical of whether or not there can be lasting peace. What's your opinion on this? Do you think there is any chance that we will see things on ground in Gaza change?
I think that there's a chance, but I am, of course, skeptical owing to previous experience. If Israel does not move back in, if not every single thing that goes wrong in Palestine is deemed to break the agreement, then perhaps there is a chance. But governance and security inside the Gaza Strip will be key. And what we really risk now is not just Israel moving back in, but also civil strife from Hamas and other related groups themselves. So I think that this is a really difficult moment, and peace is still a long, long way off on the ground.
All right. With that, Dr. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us on WION World is One with your insights on this. And once again, pardon me for that interruption earlier.
You're welcome.
For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.